Warning: this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Give us 1 hour and we'll help you change the way you think about happiness. Harvesting Happiness with Lisa Cypers Kamen is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Each week, Lisa spotlights diverse trendsetters and change agents who are the greatest contemporary thinkers and doers, devoting their lives to creating a better world in which to live. Your host, Lisa Cypers Kamen, is a widely recognized applied positive psychology expert, author, documentary filmmaker, and lecturer specializing in optimal lifestyle management. Let's get to it. Here's Lisa.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's show, where you will learn about competent communication and dealing with difficult people. My first guest is Jonathan Robinson, and this conversation was originally recorded in June of 2018. Jonathan Robinson is a psychotherapist, best-selling author of 10 books, and a professional speaker from Northern California. He has reached over 250 million people around the world with his practical methods, and his work has been translated into 47 languages. In addition, Jonathan Robinson has made numerous appearances on The Oprah Show and CNN, as well as other national TV talk shows. He spent over 35 years studying the most practical and powerful methods for personal and professional development. And today we are talking about conflict and love. Welcome, Jonathan. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really excited to have you. You talk about overcoming WMDs in your book, More Love, Less Conflict. And that puts a big smile on my face because, of course, we think of WMDs as something else.
Yeah, we think of them as weapons of mass destruction, but my term is widgets of mass distraction. And they do as much damage because if we're distracted and all over the place, we don't get to the depth and love that we're really all yearning for.
So when we talk about widgets of mass destruction, what widgets are you speaking of?
Well, mostly smartphones, but also Facebook and all these social media things. You know, 1,000 Facebook friends doesn't really equal one really good friend. And so we've kind of settled for quantity rather than quality. And I think what we really want is quality in our relationships.
Indeed. So what I hear you suggesting is, honey, put the phone down.
Yeah, 20% of couples actually look at their smartphone during sex. That's not a good sign.
What?
Yeah, that's a study that they did. And 20% of people look at their smartphone during sex, and the average person looks at their smartphone over 100 times a day.
Wow, that's incredible. One thing I do observe is when I go out to dinner, sometimes I see couples who are out for a date engaged in parallel play on their smartphones. So they're not talking to each other, but they're talking.
Exactly. And that's kind of sad. Loneliness is way up nowadays. And I think it's because people don't know really simple, powerful ways to connect deeply and intimately. And yet that's what we want. If you look at the word intimacy, the instructions for finding it are actually in the word, into me see. But unless you have a method for doing that, you might not be able to get there consistently.
So what are the top 5 things not to do when talking with your partner?
Well, 4 of them involve the letter D as in dog. One is denigration. I call that the complain, blame, and shame your partner into trying to change some. And I don't know about you, Lisa, but I've been married 25 years, and I've never had my wife, upon blaming her, where she responded, "Oh, now I see what you're talking about. Thank you for showing me the errors of my ways." I'm batting 0 for 1,000 with that one. So blame really doesn't work. And yet it's kind of a habit we fall into. And that's just one of the ways we kind of go off course. Other ways involve like distraction or denial. None of those things are really helpful for communication, but a lot of times we don't know what actually is good communication because we're surrounded by people who taught us how to communicate through the blame, complain, and shame model.
Yes. Most of us we learned how to be in relationship from those early models around us, right? Like our parents, our grandparents. And oftentimes those are not the best communication models.
Right. And you could see in our political polarization of our nation, we have a lot of people wanting to be understood, but nobody really listening. And I think people really want empathy. I was on Oprah a bunch, and one of the things I noticed about Oprah is that she's incredibly empathic. And that's why she's currently the most loved person on earth, because people really want to feel understood, but we don't have role models usually of how that type of communication happens.
Yeah. When I ask people what they want most out of their relationship, the most universal answer of both men and women is to be seen, heard, understood, and respected. That's usually what comes out of both sides.
Yeah. And, I talk about that in the More Love, Less Conflict book, that is what people want. So that's the target. So the question is, what are the easiest ways to do that consistently? Because if you give your partner what they want, they will give you what you want.
Yeah.
But we need helpers, like apps on our phone that allow us to easily give the empathy and helping our partner feel understood. And luckily those methods exist. It's just that most people don't know about them.
So give us a couple of tips. Give us a couple of strategies that would help us enjoy greater empathy, kindness, connection, compassion with not just our mates, but with anybody that we're in contact with.
Sure. Well, I'm a simple guy, so I like really simple methods. And studies show that the number one predictor of how happy a couple is the number of appreciations they give to each other. So just answering this question, what is something I like or could appreciate about my partner? And then telling them. And don't tell my wife this, Lisa, but just between you and me, I sometimes forget to do this. So I have Siri on my iPhone remind me to do this daily. And,
there's using technology.
I make sure that what I'm saying is sincere, but I need those little reminders. And my wife feels very loved by me because every day I'm finding something new that I really appreciate about her. And that helps to create more love in our relationship. And when we have the occasional disagreement, there's a good foundation of love and caring there, so we don't go into an argument.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I think that many people believe that if they have a good relationship, there won't be any conflict. Things will just, be this mythological storybook experience. And the reality of life is very different, that there will always be conflict. It's what we do with the conflict that really makes the difference.
Yeah, there will always be disagreement and things that you have to work out. But I don't think there always has to be the difficult, nasty fights that some couples have where they're trying to hurt each other. And I know my wife and I haven't had one of those for about 5 years. And let me give you an example of a very simple method that has prevented that. If my wife and I are having a hard time communicating, we're starting to get upset, either one of us can just say 2 words. And the 2 words are red light. And red light means that we have to take a 5-minute break from each other and do something else just for 5 minutes. And then we can go back to the same thing. Because if you get into momentum of upset and then you start yelling and trying to hurt your partner, that's not good. And so when I'm stressed, I can forget complicated methods, but I always can remember the words red light. And we haven't had a nasty argument in over 5 years.
No red light moments. I think that's a really good and simple intervention. Put yourself in timeout when things start to escalate. And I would say that not be afraid for me, I wouldn't be afraid to have the conflict or guide people to have a conflict, because the conflict means that there's some movement, some energy, something needs to shift or change. So when we embrace that rather than resist it, that we put ourselves in a better place to work with our partner to kind of figure out what to do next. So maybe our interpretations are a little different.
Yeah, you don't want to be in denial. You don't want to distract yourself from conflict. You just don't want to try to hurt your partner in conflict, because ultimately you're on the same team. So yeah, conflict and disagreements are inevitable. Suffering is not.
Yeah, suffering is optional in this case. And exactly. The more skilled we are at communicating, learning those basic techniques of, I would say being a good active listener is probably like communication 101. And most of us could use a little improvement in that arena.
Yeah, I agree. And there's certain simple ways to do active listening that are like 100 times more effective, where your partner feels like you really get them. And when your partner feels that, they can relax and not try to hurt you or do things that might be damaging to the relationship.
There is an adorable YouTube video that came out about 3 or 4 years ago. I think it's called "It's Not About the Nail." I don't know if you've seen it. I love that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right? I think that illustrates what we're talking about. It's a couple, a man and a woman sitting on a sofa, and the man looks at his partner's forehead really with empathy and concern, and she's got a nail sticking out of her forehead, and she's complaining about her headaches and her sweater's snagging, but she doesn't want him to tell her how to take the nail out, right? She just wants him to listen.
Well, men often get into the problem of trying to fix things rather than trying to understand and give empathy. And maybe when we return, we can talk about how to give that empathy quickly and easily so that you're not lost in that cycle of two people not feeling heard.
Let's do it. To learn more about the work of Jonathan Robinson and his new book, More Love, Less Conflict, a communication playbook for couples, we are sending our listeners over to his website, findinghappiness.com. On Twitter, he's at Deeper Happiness, and on Facebook, Deeper Happiness. Here comes the break. We'll be right back, and that is a promise. And now, a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. I want to remind everyone that problems are just facts of life, but good problem solvers are made through the right mindset. And having a balanced mind not only helps us to have a happier life, but it makes us better problem solvers. Throughout my life, therapy has been instrumental in helping me to stay focused, action-oriented, and deal with life on life's terms. This means less stress and anxiety for me and the benefit of being a more confident and productive person. A good therapist is like having your own personal cheerleader to support you through life's ups and downs. The best part is that BetterHelp is affordable, accessible, convenient, and entirely online. BetterHelp delivers therapy at your fingertips from the comfort of wherever you are, anywhere in the world. No driving, no parking, no waiting, no hassle. Want more skills to handle life's curveballs? Consider giving therapy a try, and BetterHelp is a great option. Get matched with a therapist quickly and easily after filling out a brief survey, and switch therapists at any time. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/harvestinghappiness to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/harvestinghappiness. Now let's take that break. We'll be right back.
To learn more about cultivating sustainable well-being at home and the office, visit harvestinghappiness.com and explore Lisa's experiential on-site brain fitness workshops, corporate programming, and speaking engagement services.
And we're back exploring competent communication and dealing with difficult people. Let's get back to my conversation with Jonathan Robinson that was originally recorded in June of 2018. So, Jonathan, prior to the break, we were talking about communication skills and active listening skills and how to build a better repertoire to communicate with your partner.
Yeah, in a way, it's good news that most people are really bad at this, because when you get good at it, you'll be amazed at how much you stand out and how much more your partner loves you. And luckily, the methods are rather simple. I mean, a good example, though, is really Oprah. She was really at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale. She never even lived in a house that had a bathroom. And now she's the most loved person on earth. And it's largely because people feel that she cares and she understands them and she gives empathy. So I tell people, master that ability to give empathy. And it's as easy as when somebody says something to guess how they feel by completing this sentence. Say, that must feel blank.
Yeah.
And that shows that you're listening and that you're attuned to really what's going on with them. And even if you guess wrong, they'll appreciate it because they'll say, no, that didn't make me feel angry. That made me feel hurt. But they'll feel listened to and gotten. And those types of simple methods are one of the 40 methods in the More Love, Less Conflict book that when people know them, they really transform their relationships very quickly because you're giving people exactly what they want.
So give us another tip. Another thing that we can go home tonight, sit around the dinner table with our partner and do what?
Well, how about you and I do one?
Okay, let's do it.
Because that's the best way to try this. Now, I told you that I have these questions that lead to instant intimacy. And so I thought you and I would try one together. And this one is we go back and forth, completing the sentence, if you really knew me, you'd know blank. So
All right.
I'll start off. And we don't think about our answers. We're just going back and forth 2 or 3 times. And by revealing ourselves, we get a little bit intimate in that we get to know each other better. So if you really knew me, you'd know that when I do these interviews, I'm always a little afraid that I'd be coming off like a salesman, and instead I want to come off sincere. So that's something that's in the back of my mind.
Aw. If you really knew me, you would know that when I do these interviews, I sometimes get worried that I'm going to become tongue-tied, and sometimes I really do, and it embarrasses me.
Thank you. If you really knew me, you'd know that I really appreciate people like you who seem really competent in their communication. Every communication I had with you and your staff was like really clear and crisp. And I just really love that because you don't get it that often.
Thank you. If you really knew me, you would know that when our guests on the show follow the instructions that we provide to make their experience easy and smooth, it makes me love them.
Great. Now, we just did that for a minute and a half, and already I feel closer to you.
Same.
I know you a little bit more. If couples do that for 5 minutes, they get to a place where, they're feeling really connected. And so it doesn't need to take long. It's really like a great technology to get people back to love or out of conflict without it taking 5 hours. Instead, it can take, 5 minutes or even a minute. And sometimes you can get back to a place of deeper love.
And when we talk about love, we are not talking about romantic love. We're talking about sort of that deep appreciation for another person's presence in our life. That, yes, it can include romantic love, but that's not the essence of what we're saying here.
Yeah, there's lots of different flavors of love, lots of different connections, whether it be a child or a friend or a lover. But really, the good news is that the methods to get to that, I would call it intimacy, are all the same. So it really doesn't matter what type of relationship. It is all dependent on certain communication skills that most people don't have, so that when they discover them, they're amazed at how much more intimacy and love they end up having in their life.
So you write about doubling the love in your life in less than a minute a day. Is this the exercise, or is there another one that can make us sort of ground and root ourselves in that loving place?
Well, that refers to the appreciation exercise, where you say something you appreciate about your partner. And studies show that people who actually do that for a minute a day report that they have twice as much love as previously a week later, which is astounding to me, because that's not a lot of effort. But there's also other communication methods that lead to more love very quickly, such as completing the sentence, right now I'm feeling, and I'm feeling blank, and what I really want with you is blank.
Interesting. Well, you have to be able to identify your feelings. And oftentimes when you ask people how they're feeling, they'll say, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I have a list of feelings in the More Love, Less Conflict book, so people get better at that. Because at first, that's a learned skill as well.
Yeah.
Especially for a guy like me that wasn't in touch with his feelings, I had to learn, well, what am I feeling and what am I wanting? And, it's hard to hit a target if you don't know what it is. Yeah. But if you know you want to feel connected, or you want to feel like you're belonging, or you want to feel heard, your partner has a better chance of giving that to you.
Well, if you can identify what it is that you need and your partner loves you, most people would say, I would love to give that to that person. If I know that's what makes him or her tick, I want to do that.
Yeah, but most people don't tell their partner what it is that they're wanting. They assume that their partner is a psychic mind reader, and they should just know that. But my partner, unfortunately, is not psychic, and I think that's the case that a lot of people have.
Mine is not psychic, although he does a pretty good job. I mean, he's I have to say, he's very intuitive, and that's a good thing. And my guess is the longer that we're together with our partners, sort of the more that happens. You can sort of intuit what they need if you're paying attention.
Yeah, but it's also true that a lot of people don't learn normally. It's a 50% divorce rate, but the divorce rate for second and third marriages is even higher. So I think it's not always assumed that we would learn, but people don't necessarily learn because they are focused on the wrong things. And that's why books or shows like this that talk about specific methods or ideas can be really helpful.
Well, the gratitude practice, hands down, probably number one positive psychology practice in the universe to increase happiness, right? So it makes perfect sense that when it's translated to our interpersonal relationships, expressing appreciation, rules. It's foreplay, right? Like if you say something nice about your partner that you're thankful for, it encourages the love lights going on.
Yeah. And there's a simple mantra you can say that helps you to tune into gratitude. And I had a friend who said he got a mantra from a guru in India that helped him feel incredibly grateful for his wife. And I asked him what it was, and he wouldn't tell me. He said, you're going to have to go there yourself. So I traveled all the way to India to get this magical mantra. And, that's a long way. But I finally get to the ashram, and I talk to this guru. I'm a little bit jet lagged and worn out, but I said, can you please tell me this mantra? I want to feel even more grateful for my wife. And he says, yes, my mantra is the most powerful mantra on earth. And he leans in to whisper it in my ear and says, whenever possible, repeat the following words. The mantra I give you are the words, thank you. Well, I said, that's it? I traveled 18,000 miles to get thank you? That's it? He says, no, that's it is a mantra you have been using. That makes you feel like you never have enough. My mantra is thank you, not that's it. That's it will take you nowhere.
Yeah,
So,
thank you, thank you, thank you. It's so true. It is extremely powerful. We are nearly out of time, so I have to ask this one question.
yeah.
How would our president's approval ratings go up 20 points by in 2 minutes using a couple of key phrases?
Well, how about this? Now, he wouldn't ever say this, but if he could, if he said, "Hey, I've contributed to creating this polarized nation by putting people down and fighting, and I see that that's not really the type of nation I want to create. I want to create a nation where we're able to talk to each other and connect and work things out slowly and clearly by listening to each other. And I commit to trying my best to do that from now on. And I'm going to need your help because that's not an easy thing to do."
Yeah, beautiful. And we use the same logic and apply it to all of our relationships, whether they're romantic, personal, professional, and then we get to change the world together. How cool
Exactly.
is that? Wow.
Yep.
Well, to learn more about the work of Jonathan Robinson and his newest book, More Love, Less Conflict, a communication playbook for couples, please visit www.morelovelessconflict.com. And on that website, there are 12 questions for deeper that will lead you to deeper intimacy. And you can also connect with Jonathan Robinson on Twitter at Deeper Happiness and on Facebook, Deeper Happiness. Jonathan, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Lisa.
Let's take that quick pause. We'll be right back.
Did you know that happiness is actually good for your health? Happy people live longer, are more productive, and make better partners, parents, and professionals. Connect with us on Facebook at Harvesting Happiness and follow Lisa on Twitter at Lisa Kamen for a daily dose of inspiration.
We're back, continuing the conversation about competent communication and dealing with difficult people. My next guest is Sam Elliston, and this conversation was originally recorded in September of 2017. Sarah, or Sam Elliston, is an expert in the art of dealing with difficult people. She is a top workshop leader and a member of the faculty of the William Glasser Institute, which espouses reality therapy to foster behavioral change. Her instructional career began long after she even became aware that she herself was a difficult person, traits that began in Lincoln, Massachusetts, where she grew up. For more than 30 years, Sam Elliston has been teaching and training, first as a high school teacher in Ohio, and then as an administrator at the not-for-profit sector. Elliston holds a BA in International Relations from the University of Maine and a Master of Arts in Teaching from Brown University. She also has a very long-standing career with the United Way's Volunteer Center, coordinating volunteers for all sorts of sectors. Welcome, Sam. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, well, this is going to be great fun. Okay, so are you a reformed difficult person, or do you still have those traits hiding?
I don't think they ever go away completely, but I'd like to think that I'm a lot better than I used to be. I have a great story. This is my little success story of the week. Last week when I went to choir practice, I was running a little bit late and I noticed I'd gotten food on my shirt. So I quickly threw on sort of a big galumphy sweater that didn't really matter what it looked like. And I went to choir practice and we sang and we had a great time. And then afterwards I was talking to the choir director and I began to realize that all the women in the choir were kind of around me, behind me, and they were pulling on my sweater, and it sounded like a lot of little birds, you know. They were talking about my sweater. And finally I turned and I said, what's going on? And they said, your sweater's on inside out. And I laughed and said, well, I'm among friends, you know. I guess it's not going to break any social rules. Shall I turn it inside, right side out? And then we all laughed about that. That sounds so small and insignificant. But as recently as 3 years ago, I might have said to them, well, what's it to you? It's my sweater.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of defensive, always expecting someone to be attacking me, so you better defend right away. I don't do it I'd like to think I don't do it anymore. sometimes the thought goes through my head. But this particular evening, I just laughed and actually went in the ladies' room and changed the sweater and came out and said, oh, look, it's all right. And we laughed, walked to the car. Driving home, I thought, that's different. That is a different behavior. So that's my success story based, compared to someone who went through life arguing with almost everybody or coming when someone pointed something out, having a defensive reaction all the time. I'm happy about that.
Well, I am happy for you because you do not sound like a snark mistress to me. I mean, you sound like such a nice person. And that's what makes me so interested in your book and in your Reformation process. How do you identify difficult people and identify ways that we can speak with them that does not incite drama?
Yeah, well, that's the whole purpose of the book. But one of the things that I like to quote in terms of looking at people and are they difficult or not, most of us know if someone's difficult. I mean, we all have at least one person we'd sort of cheerfully like to strangle if we could, just because they're so annoying. But some of the habits of a difficult person are criticizing, blaming, complaining, nagging, threatening, punishing, bargaining, and bribing. Those are what Dr. William Glasser of the Glasser Institute and Reality Therapy, he calls those the toxic habits. And I think those are pretty obviously the kinds of things that difficult people do. And as I said, when I look back at my life, I realized I kind of went through with my, how you hold your hands up when you're boxing. I think I took on the world that way. I'm not sure everybody saw that because I present myself as being confident and educated and intelligent and responsive, and I can be nice, So,
clearly.
so I think it surprised some people when I would become defensive or angry or critical or blaming. And I honestly, for me, I didn't know I was difficult until I was 50. I had a boss that I really respected, and she was praising the work that I was doing. And then she said, by the way, you have this annoying little habit of sort of getting into these little tantrums. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, never mind. I'll tell you the next time it happens. And so she pointed out to me 2 weeks later that I was stomping around the office, lifting up books, dropping them, opening drawers, slamming them, muttering to myself. And we were in if you took a good-sized living room and put 4 or 5 cubicles in there, that's we were pretty tightly packed. And it was pretty annoying to my coworkers, and I didn't even notice. She called me in her office and said, Sam, what you're doing right now, that has to stop. And I said, what am I doing? And so she literally described my behavior to me, and I said, oh. And she said, we can't get our work done. There's this atmosphere of tension, and we can't make phone calls. And, I was stunned. I didn't realize I was doing it, and I had no idea that anyone was paying any attention to what I was doing anyway, because I was sort of trapped in my little world. And I've had folks say to me, oh, well, you just had an anger management problem, but it really was much greater than that. I literally didn't know that people were paying attention to me. And when I observed my mother having the same kind of a little temper tantrum a couple of weeks later, I thought, aha, that's where I learned it. And where I went from that.
It's always the mother.
Well, she never did it outside the house. This was the kind of thing that she just did with her daughters or her family. And I missed that little message that you're not allowed to do this, or it's not appropriate to do it outside the house. And if she taught me that, I missed it. And so I think when I felt comfortable with people, I thought being honest was showing how much anger you have or complaining, or when people say, well, what do you think of that person? Really saying what I really thought of them, which was no as germane, as no as polite anyway. So what I discovered was that as I started to look at how I was impacting other people, I began to realize they perceived me very differently. So part of what I learned was difficult people probably don't know what they're doing. They don't know how they're impacting other people. And they aren't aware how other people perceive them. However, if we have difficult people in our lives, we kind of like don't want to go near them. We don't want to talk to them because we're pretty sure they're going to get defensive and argumentative and angry. So the whole book is about how to look at them, get concrete and specific about what exactly they're saying and what they're doing, and then looking at yourself to get clear on why it's annoying you and whether it's a pure thing or whether they just remind you of your second grade teacher who was mean to you, in which case you can let go of it and let them be who they are.
Well, it's interesting that you say this because there are difficult people in all of our lives. We all recognize that person or those few people. And in my experience, what I observe to happen is that everybody around that person develops a methodology of communication that I call the walking on eggshell process.
Yes.
Which, you keep everything really neutral because you don't want to incite them. And that takes a lot of energy and also disconnects us from the very thing that we want out of our relationships, from the leaning in, from the intimacy.
Totally. Yes.
And it gyps everybody out of a really good experience.
And people are always asking me on these radio interviews, well, what did it feel like to be difficult? And I don't think I was aware of being difficult, but I sure was aware of being distanced and not having as the kind of close intimacy with others that I wanted or that I thought I had. And then I realized that they had that with, other friends, especially at different work sites where I thought, oh, we're pals, we're getting along. And then I realized they were going to lunch with somebody else, or I'd find out that they'd done things in the evening with someone else who also worked there. And I think, I guess I'm really not as friends with them as I thought I was.
Sam, we're going to need to take a break. Sorry to interrupt you. We're going to need to jump off for a couple of minutes and take a break. And when we return, we'll carry on the conversation with Sarah Sam Elliston and her book, Lessons from a Difficult Person, How to Deal with People Like Us. You can learn more by going to www.sarahellistonconsulting.com. On Twitter, the handle is @MaineSam, and Maine is as in the state. And on Facebook, you can find Sarah at sarah.elliston. Here comes the break, and we'll be right back to continue the conversation with Sam Elliston.
Who says money can't buy happiness? Whether you are a skeptic or seeker, check out Lisa's new book. Are we happy yet? 8 Keys to Unlocking a Joyful Life, a boot camp manual for greater emotional fitness, is available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, IndieBound, and HarvestingHappiness.com. Here's a truth bomb. Emotions are contagious, and happiness is a universally desired state. But we tend to forget that we all have the freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable each day, regardless of external circumstances. Explore the journey of human happiness, how to find it and keep it, with Lisa's documentary film, H Factor. Where is your heart? Visit HarvestingHappiness.com to learn more.
And we're back talking about competent communication and dealing with difficult people. Let's return to my conversation with Sam Elliston, originally recorded in September of 2017. So Sam, before the break, you had mentioned that, interestingly, the difficult person does not recognize that he or she is difficult, but does recognize that they are not having those kinds of, warm and fuzzy relationships with others and don't know why.
Or they've given up, or they think that everybody is mean to them. Who knows all the different conclusions that they might have. But I'm quite certain that they sense a distance. And I think they're probably unhappy whether they know it or not. I mean, people may not acknowledge that. It's interesting because when we observe or we live with and we work with a difficult person, it starts to feel like it's deliberate, like that person is always doing that and they do it just to get my goat or because they're mean or whatever. And we ascribe a lot of motivations to why someone is difficult. And the first step in learning to communicate with a difficult person is to let go of all that. And so when I do workshops in this area and in the book, I have some exercises around how can you describe the exact behavior without putting the negative twist on it. So if someone is interrupting you all the time, how can you look at that as a positive thing, a positive behavior? Simply say perhaps, oh, this person is really interested in what I have to say. They're so eager that they can't wait for my answer. Now, that may or may not be true, but if that's just an example of, we think someone is a manipulator, well, that person really knows what they want. They really know what they want you to do or how they want it to come out. So they're very clear, as opposed to they may be a manipulator, but it doesn't help us ever communicate with them or have a conversation with them if we look at them through those judgment lenses, if you want to call them that. I like to always quote Dale Carnegie. He says, it isn't what you have or who you are or where you are or what you're doing that makes you happy or unhappy. It's what you think about it. So if you can start the process of changing how you think about the difficult person, that's the first step. And the book is full of different activities for you to do once you've clarified what the behavior is. This is the other piece. First of all, you take the emotion out of it. And the second one is, what words is the person using and what actions is the person doing? Because ironically, if you put thinking and feeling and doing all together as behaviors, we know what we think and we know what we feel, and we're always trying to change how we think or change how we feel. But doing is part of that, and we're often unaware of our actions and our words, and those are the easiest to change. Yeah. I mean, you'd spend 3 weeks trying to tell yourself whatever mantra or meditative, words that you're using for 3 weeks to change a thought or a feeling. If you change the way you put your shoes on, instead of putting one on first, change it and put the other one on first. Do that for a week, and you'll start to look at the world differently. When you change what you do, then you change how you view how you look at the world, and your thoughts and your feelings will come along. So the first part of the beginning is getting really clear on what the person's saying and what they're doing, because you want to work up to having a conversation where you can explain to them that this is what you see them doing. This is the impact it has on you, on the team, on the family, on the customer, whatever the approach is. And then you ask, do you know you're doing this? Are you aware it has this impact? Is that what you want? So you're not telling them to change. You're presenting the information and asking them if that's what they want.
That's funny. It brings a story to mind of somebody in my family who shall remain nameless because they do listen to this podcast occasionally. This person was on vacation in Bora Bora and was texting me from Bora Bora about some minutia about another family member who also shall remain nameless. And finally, I said, do you know that you're micromanaging? And do you also know, are you aware that if you're texting me from Bora Bora, you're not savoring being in Bora Bora? I never heard from the person again.
Ever?
Well, no, while they were on vacation.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those moments, and this person is known to be difficult in the family dynamic, and it just made me chuckle,
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly. But instead of saying to her, for Pete's sake, start enjoying your vacation, you asked a question. Yeah. And actually, you were looking for some of the tools. That's one of the tools that I encourage people to use. Although when you ask the question if that person had been standing next to you, they might have snarled at you, might have reacted in a negative way. So we also.
I'm sure there would have been steam coming out of the ears.
Yeah, they didn't answer you after that. Or at least they didn't complain anymore. That solved the problem too. But So the book includes the whole process of listening to someone and actively listening to whatever the feeling is that you might perceive is underneath their reaction. So I've got examples in there, exercises. I have some dialogues of how a conversation might go. But you were asking about incentives, and I honestly believe that the strongest need that every human has is to belong and be connected. Just what you were saying at the beginning of the show. When somebody takes the time to sit down with you and say, did you know you were doing this? Do you know it's a problem? Do you know we value you? We want you around? And are you aware it's having this impact? Is that what you want? That actually is a caring kind of thing to do, even though they might not perceive it at first.
Yeah.
So that's the incentive, is to, in all that you're doing with them, to be building a relationship rather than tearing it down.
Yeah. And this is a hard conversation for some people to initiate. You know,
yes.
When you have the minimizer, the arguer, the shusher, the interrupter, I mean, there are a whole host of descriptors of these kinds of people. But what I heard you say is a couple of things that are really important. One is reframing the language, or reframing how you interpret those kinds of behaviors.
Or maybe stop interpreting completely.
Yes, to stop interpreting. Take the emotion, our personal emotion, out of it, and then what you're talking about is that the emotion will follow the action. So you say that thinking, feeling, and doing equals the behavior, but once we change the action, the emotion and hopefully the outcome will change. What about creating a bigger or greater sense of belonging with the person? We don't have a lot of time, but I want to give a couple more tips because this is great stuff.
Well, in addition to the toxic habits that I mentioned at the beginning that the difficult people usually do, Dr. Glasser also has 7 caring habits. So if you can practice these with your difficult person, supporting, encouraging, listening, accepting, it's always hard.
Oh, yeah.
Trusting, respecting, and negotiating differences. If you really can hold to those as much as possible, you will have a better relationship, and that is part of what will meet their need for belonging. The reason I wrote the book is because I realized so many people didn't come right out and say it to me. And when I started looking at all the weird things that people did, thinking that they were telling me that I was difficult, but it took, 50 years before someone actually said it to me in a way that I heard. That's why I wrote the book.
Yeah. And it's courageous of the person that it sounds like carefrontationally told you. I mean, right? Or no, or was she just blunt?
She was fairly blunt, but we already had a really good relationship. So yeah. We both were very direct. And so she didn't hurt my feelings in any way. I was like, oh, I didn't know I was doing that. And I certainly didn't know it was bothering you. There was something I was going to say. I've lost it.
Oh, well, hopefully it'll come back. What about neutralizing our own triggers? Because we get set off with these people, I mean, we're humans, nobody's perfect in their communication style. And we get set off because we then begin to feel minimized or as my son likes to call it, butt hurt, when they behave badly.
A lot of exercises in the book to do just that. So that you can listen without taking it personally. I encourage people to practice having the conversation with someone else. Actually, there's an exercise where you make a list of all the things that the person's going to say that you think they might say in reaction to you. And then on the other side of the page, you make a list of all the things you might say to them that will continue the conversation. It's not an easy conversation, but if the difficult person is important to you, is someone that if they have the skills you want, or they play a role in your life that you want to keep them there, I encourage you to work up to having the conversation.
This is great advice, and we do love and care for these people in our lives. That's why they are in the orbit. So we have to find some way to communicate, and these are great tips. The book, once again, by Sarah or Sam Elliston, is Lessons from a Difficult Person, How to Deal with People Like Us. You can learn more at her website, sarahelliston.com. On Twitter, the handle is @MaineSam, and Maine as in the state. And on Facebook, I have Sarah.Elliston, but there may be another secret page. Sarah, what?
Well, there's Sarah Elliston author. That will get you to the page about the book. And
Perfect.
Then, yeah, that's a way to get a message to me. Or if you do go to my website, sarahelliston.com, and Sarah has an H, and if you sign up for my email, then you'll receive some pages from the workshop that will help you get started in the exercises. So thanks a lot for having me here.
Oh my gosh, thanks for coming and giving us such great tips to deal with the cranky and difficult people in our lives, and to also, take a look at ourselves and how we can be better in our communication style, not just with difficult people, but with everybody, because the goal is connection, right? We need to belong.
If that's what happiness is, and I think it is.
Thanks for joining us on Harvesting Happiness today. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen on behalf of my guests, Jonathan Robinson and Sam Elliston, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day, and remember to be kind to one another.
Keep harvesting your own happiness anytime and anywhere, from the comfort of wherever you are. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes via our free app or from our libraries at toginet.com, iTunes, Google Play, and other fine podcast platforms. To learn more about Lisa's global consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Spread more joy by liking us on Facebook at Harvesting Happiness and following Lisa on Twitter at Lisa Kamen. Harvesting Happiness is produced in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU Radio Malibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.